So this is Private Eye doing the special report on UK as the center of money laundering and fraud and corruption. And this is the first page of the investigative special report. Now this is possible, only possible by the inclusion of the role of the English or British or UK judicial bureaucracy, which is corrupt to the core, serving the purpose of money launderers and criminal gangsters that are using Britain as an offshore island with the most effective access to organized crimes being rubber-stamped through the complicit criminally negligent, dysfunctional, and corrupt judicial system. In the previous short intro, I was referring to David Neuberger being recruited by David Lidington. Now, Neuberger was recruited by Lidington just before Neuberger left the post of the president of the, quote, Supreme Court sometime in 2017. Now, Neuberger said, as reported by Martin Bentham on the evening No Standards, that Brexit would be followed by and would produce benefits in the shape of London becoming the center of legal disputes. Now that's the kind of crafty way of saying that London would be used as a money laundering and rubber stamping court bureaucracy center by the world's crooks and big money looters and gangsters and others, and their counterparts operating in Britain. So that's the line that was intended to assure those who were worried in the immediate aftermath of the so-called Brexit results in June 2016, or since June 2016. So Neuberger, as the just retiring, if you like, first president of the redesignated Supreme Court of England, was legitimizing big money fraudsters and money laundering and all the rest of it. And there was no hint whatsoever in anything Neuberger said or anything Lidington heard him say about the dominant role being played by the court system in facilitating big money laundering operations under the guise of being the world's best legal system, which is the completely ridiculous assertion. And here, carry on laundering, the Private Eye is calling its special report headline. How Britain's wash cycle, that is money laundering, big money laundering, corruption and fraud, keeps crime bosses and kleptocrats in business and in power. And this is a special report by somebody called Richard Brooks. So it gives a list of big banks that are doing the money laundering. And at paragraph 1 of the section subheaded Standard Fare. Britain's other great launderer to the world, Standard Chartered Bank, remained similarly committed to the business after its 2012 run-in with the authorities. Now that's a totally false kind of equation. There was no run-in with the quote authorities. The word authorities and the phrase run-in, they imply the rigorous existence of really kind of ethical and morally active, investigative and regulatory organizations. In Britain, there is no regulatory organization. There is in name a list of organizations that are supposed to be holding executive decision makers to account. For example, in the case of the legal licensed law traders, there is a thing called legal ombudsman. Now, whenever there are crooks and liars and thieves and racists behaving wrongly and causing severe damages to their so-called clients or victims, more accurately, and a complaint is lodged with the regulatory authorities initially of the two branches of the, let's say the main two branches of the licensed law traders, the Law Society and the Bar Standards Board. These names, Standards Board, is being used as they themselves use it at this time, 2020. For centuries, the Inns of Court, that is the four Inns of Court, Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, Middle Temple, Inner Temple, they have been controlling access to the legal kind of bureaucracy without any accountability, without whatsoever any accountability, ethics or morality. And their counterparts, the Law Society, which is the creator and controller and peddler for the licensed law traders called quote solicitors. Both of them, if a complaint is made against a solicitor or a barrister so-called, to either the Bar Standards Board or the Law Society or the Solicitors Regulation Authority, as this confection is now kind of spun as, the first thing they would say is to file a complaint to the legal ombudsman. Now that is a corrupt outfit. It is supposed to be the regulator for the licensed law traders. But far from regulating, it acts as a gate, as a filter to obstruct most complaints and complainants. And as I said previously, the legal ombudsman employs long practiced tactics to completely frustrate the complainant on a spurious diversionary kind of series of activities that they don't really need to undertake, the complainants that is. But that is what the legal ombudsman causes complainants to encounter, experience, suffer from. And it is such an exhaustive program of frustration that most complainants who make the mistake of ever complaining to the legal ombudsman never repeat the exercise. They completely give up on complaining to the legal ombudsman. And the legal ombudsman is on the record acting and acts as the racist kind of upholder and racist endorser and backer. Whenever complaints are made to the legal ombudsman against licensed law traders called solicitors, then the legal ombudsman triggers one of its most often triggered obstructions against complainants. And what happens is that if the complaints are against licensed law trading, racist liars who are white, then the legal ombudsman has a filtering routine of dismissing all such complaints. Only in exceptional kind of cases, exceptions created by the complainants concerned doing extra hard work to get the legal ombudsman to investigate a complaint against this particular individual firm or individual. Because of the relaxation of the regulations, licensed law traders who are barristers before were not allowed to act as solicitors, but the corrupt profession has confected a compromise whereby barristers can be deemed as solicitors, and solicitors can be converted into being deemed as barristers, or as both. So one complaint that this campaign is absolutely centrally involved in concerns an outstanding complaint against a barrister turned solicitor, who was the one that was asked to do the basic work in order for our campaign to stop the criminal gangsters attacking the Cat's House in July to October 2012. We shall be giving the details of those attacks in due course, but here the solicitor, barrister cum solicitor or barrister turned solicitor, lied, and he colluded with the party that he was supposedly instructed to act against by our campaign. He, being an Asian from Bangladesh, was one of a number of licensed law traders against whom simultaneous complaints were made with the legal ombudsman. And the complaints made against this particular ethnicity-linked Asian one were as severe as the complaints made against the others who were white. And guess what? The legal ombudsman only upheld in a tokenistic way the complaint against this Asian licensed law trader, and it failed to investigate the complaints against the white ones, but made by the same organization, a campaign. After a long, grueling, frustrating series of communications with the serial liars at the legal ombudsman, they only upheld a tokenistic way, upheld a complaint against this Asian licensed law trader. So we decided that we cannot on the facts trust the legal ombudsman. For a start, they discriminated against this Asian licensed law trader. And can you see the irony? We are the ones who had been caused severe damages by this same licensed law trader, the Asian one. And yet we were, without his knowledge, we were protecting him against racist legal ombudsman who chose him and ordered him to apologize to us. I mean, we didn't refuse the fact or withdraw any of the complaints against him. But the point is that we found that our complaint was only treated as a complaint when the complaint concerned a licensed law trader who was an Asian. So we didn't pursue with the legal ombudsman anything further up to that, beyond that point, about that particular ruling against this, because this is what our principle, our values, our morality and our ethics causes us to do, to defend even the most idiotic and stupid and corrupt Asian whom we considered was being targeted by the legal ombudsman, although the complaint was filed by ourselves against this particular Asian licensed law trader. This is rare, unique, absolutely world exclusive kind of moral standard and ethical behavior shown by us. Not just on that occasion, but in all occasions. Every time we do stand up for the values, even if the values help an otherwise stupid criminal idiot and crook. Because if we see the evidence of that crook, same crook being targeted for adjudication and regulatory kind of order by the likes of the legal ombudsman, who target this particular criminal for the reasons that are not relevant or not fair. And the targeting was based on ethnicity of this particular individual licensed law trader. Now the other two, Edward Fitzpatrick of Garden Court Chambers based in the Lincoln's Inn, and Lucy Green, who was at that time working from Sadak, Southeast One, from a firm of solicitors. She has left that firm of solicitors since and has been employed by Peabody Operation, a housing operation called Peabody. Now those two were racistly, stupidly prejudiced against our campaign and our movement and our rights and our claims against the Tower Hamlets community housing, where the crook Michael Tyrrell was still in paid post as the chief executive of the corrupt outfit that had been given thousands of council properties, council housing stock by Tower Hamlets, the crooked council, which handed over the properties that were taken over fully by 2006 by the Tower Hamlets crooked community housing. So we have absolutely no confidence in the narrative, in this so-called claim that it's a special report about lack of regulation that is being claimed by the private eye, because the court system, it's not just the likes of the law societies kind of SRA or the bar standards boards of the 4 inches of court that are failing, that are complicit with their criminal members. They are negligent members, they are law-breaking, rule-breaking, listed members, licensed law traders. It is the court system, the judiciary, which is many times more complicit with the crooks and criminality that are put on its kind of machine, the court system, to rubber stamp and process. And this is done by taking the money. The court system is funded by fees to a significant extent. And those fees come from the ones who are, quote, wealthy. And by wealthy, we refer to their being criminals, robbers, thieves, and gangsters, and big gang networks, drug networks, illicit money networks, and other networks where they bring their kind of application for laundering to be done by the apparently best judicial system in the world, as praised and certified by the just retiring President of the Supreme Court, David Neuberger. Neuberger had only taken part not long before that kind of endorsement of the crooked role being played and capable of being played by the judicial system in England. He had just been in post as the president, the first appointed president of the so-called Supreme Court. In the case brought against the government, and that was 2017, about unconstitutionally break of rule of law and all the other things. How then could that person change the perception and change the description and change the role of the same system so soon? And that shows that he was open to being manipulated and maneuvered, or if you like, quote, bribed. However, he was bribed with praise or whatever, but he was effectively saying the very opposite of what his ruling, which he presented to the public, ruling against the government's particular decision, was saying about the values and principles and so on, about the legal system. So this needs a kind of break or silence of about 1 minute. Let's see the 1 minute. So what is happening with this conversion or this degeneration of David Neuberger? So soon after he was echoing or representing or voicing or presenting almost credible standards of ethics and morality and rule of law while he was in place as the president of the Supreme Court. How did David Neuberger degenerate so fast? And Neuberger's degeneration is not an exceptional affair or incident. Neuberger degenerated. Let's see what he was saying. So he was quoted by this Prospect magazine on 6th of December 2018. David Neuberger on the fundamental importance of the rule of law. It was about the Article 50 ruling against the government. And Neuberger was quoted as the authoritative or as the leading authoritative voice in support of the rule of law in that case. So what changed for him to say that Brexit, the very thing that the Article 50 and all the other kind of contests highlighted was completely against the rule of law? And Neuberger was extensively reported by the Law Gazette, Prospect, and the Guardian as being associated with the call for defending the rule of law. And yet, when he appeared in that piece in the Evening Standard, bylined by Martin Bentham, Neuberg was talking about Brexit bringing a lot of business to the courts in London. And this was going to be the boon, the bonanza, the benefit of Brexit. The very thing that he was at pains to point out was a threat to the rule of law. So Neuberger was caught in those two positions and remains caught in those two positions and remains exposed as a liar. Neuberger lied. Why? Why do careerists lie? And that is where Private Eye in this so-called special report is failing, because it doesn't talk about the role played by the court system. And it doesn't talk about the legal ombudsman. It doesn't talk about the Solicitors Regulation Authority. Why? Because most of the crimes of the money launderers and offshore and those big moneyed criminals who use the British court system, the legal system, only do that, they can only use the legal so-called system if they also can use the licensed law traders, the QCs, the senior barristers so-called, and the licensed law trading solicitors. So the entirety of the English legal system is a marketplace. And the myth that the English law is the best in the world and all the rest of it is absolute myth. And it's a lie. And it's lethal lie, not against the world, rest of the world only. It's a lethal lie denying the constitutional legal rights of the majority of the people in this country. So whenever a government or a conglomerate or an entity, big on entity and agency, fails its duties as owed to the public, according to the charters, the treaties, the conventions, the declarations, and the agreements that I have been listing every day, that Britain remains formally signed up to. When those are violated and the ordinary person is left destitute, dispossessed, displaced, disenfranchised, and in kind of deprivation of extreme kind, and is made homeless and is robbed of their possessions, where do they go? The case, as an exception, as I said, was the case of AA versus Sadak Bara Council, where the ruling was given on the 14th of October 2014 by a Deputy High Court Judge Anthony Thornton QC, who I understand is no longer around. I think he passed away not long after that ruling. But the point is that that was an exceptional case in which he found employees in the housing department in the London Borough of Sadak. Group of employees had been for years engaged in open conspiracy to evict a tenant and to rob his belongings, to destroy his digitally stored work and archives and documents and data. Now, extrapolate that and come back to the question of the ban on evictions being lifted. Compared to those cases and compared to the context that I have summarized and updated by explaining and detailing the corrupt role played by David Neuberger and two-faced or three-faced kind of stances that David Neuberger, the president of the Supreme Court of England or UK, whatever, played. So if Neuberger can behave with that kind of brazen lack of any concern that he's lying and three-faced stances would not be found out, or rather he would not be held to account for that kind of behavior, what chance is there of any of the hundreds of county court judges who are criminals who will be rubber stamping the eviction applications starting this week? What chance? There is no chance of them thinking twice about any consequences on them, any consequences against their careers, any consequences against their kind of integrity or reputation or whatever. So extrapolate and include all the agencies that are supposed to be under regulatory kind of scrutiny by various regulatory outfits. Let's list some of the main ones that are often kind of listed. The UK government departments are supposed to be open to scrutiny by UK members of parliament, whose scrutiny role is kind of contained in the so-called departmental select committees. So, for example, the housing ministry or housing department has got a select committee. I mean, it is most unsuitably chaired by a racist criminal called Clive Betts. He is a Cambridge educated or Cambridge licensed, Cambridge stamped criminal, racist liar, Clive Betts. He is an MP from the Sheffield area. So he is completely unfit and he is completely unsuitable and is completely the wrong person to have any kind of interest in holding the local councils to account. Clive Betts is a criminal liar, and Clive Betts can behave as a criminal liar because there is nothing available in the quote parliamentary system to hold the likes of him, racist lying likes of him, to account for their racist lying while they are abusing the position of chairing or being a member of that kind of select committee, that committee or similar select committee. So the select committee, for a start, is not the place which can be even mentioned as a source of criticism of the government department for allowing the local councils to commit crimes and criminality. And that is where most of the criminality and crimes against housing rights are committed, with the collusion and with the directive of and with the conspiracy with the Department of Housing and whatever else is the current name, Ministry of Housing and local government or something. Because when Tony Blair appointed John Prescott as the Secretary of State for DEFRA, DEFRA was the department that was then broken into two, and one part is the housing. But at the time, DEFRA was the department that contained the housing brief. So Prescott put coercion and pressure on councils like the Tower Hamlets Council at the beginning of this century and demanded that they transfer the housing stock, council housing stock, to a private gang of criminals like Popla Haque and the gang of criminals set up by a former council housing kind of post holder, the racist criminal Mike Tyrrell, the Tower Hamlets Community Housing, or THCH. Now, when thousands of council housing stock, thousands of stock is transferred away from the council, it is logical, it's obvious, numerical thing to say that thousands of people are being robbed of the opportunity to find housing through the council. So there is a whole lot of detail involved in the various points whereby the transfer of the stock from council to a gang of criminals adds to the unavailability of council housing stock for people to be housed in. But that's the aggregate collective number. What happens to the decision one by one decision to allocate or not to allocate any housing entitlements to individual kind of applicants and individuals in dire need, and especially individuals in severe need which is created by the behavior of the council itself. The council takes away the housing stock away from the control of the council. And then the council is also the local authority, which supposedly is the housing authority for the local homeless persons or persons in high need of housing. How can that happen? If the same council is removing really available housing stock from control of its own operations, where can it go and find the housing? And that is not even to begin to talk about the new build, because the people who make the decision about allocation, about the suitability and about the standard of need and the urgency of the need for housing are not held to account. So the accountability is not there either. So if they are not held to account and there is no way of getting redress from their wrong decisions, then they can make any number of people homeless. They can refuse and reject any number of applications and there is no accountability, which is the case. So even if the complainants theoretically are able to go to court, they cannot physically go to court. Being on the street is enough of a denial of basic human rights. How can any person in that position behave in the way that they need to behave, by having access, open, independent, and sustained access to resources that can only be available in an office that they can control and have access to, like a solicitor, licensed law trader's office, or similar. So when the council or councils allow liars to make decisions while being and staying and in post as employees of the same council, what they're doing is they're committing additional crime every single minute. Because by allowing the criminals to stay in post after they have been engaged in violating somebody's rights to housing and then removing the others' entitlement to get allocated to the available stock, to one of the available stocks or the numbers of available stocks. There is a criminal process in kind of process ongoing. So every council is committing crime every single minute in that way, as is the county court system doing the crime against the various targets of the eviction process. Remember, there is no right to actual say or appearance if you are not a licensed law trader. There is no right. You can only appear under various kind of detailed excuses, elaborately worked out, or has to be those which have to be elaborately worked out in order to justify a non-licensed law trading person to appear as an advocate for the rights of the persons being targeted by eviction. Even when there is such an allowance or permission, the person is not allowed to fully represent the facts, the evidence. So the private eye is not talking about any of that. It's talking about the banks working as the conduits for the big multi-billion pound corruption and criminal gangs. But the private eye reference to regulators or the regulation being lax in this country is leaving out most of the regulatory kind of agencies, including the courts, because the court system is the ultimate regulator within the definition of the Constitution, the unwritten constitutional definition. Is one of the arms of the state. The government, the executive is one arm, parliament is another arm, the judiciary is another arm. So, if all the three main arms of the state are against the individuals, against the families, against the people whose rights are being affected by all their behavior, what chance is there that there will be any fair outcome for the victims? There is none. There is no chance. And that is where the entirety of the media, which the private eye calls the street of shame, including the private eye itself, are failing the people in this country. And that is where we shall leave this part, which is part B, coming up to 12:28 hours GMT in the afternoon of Thursday, the 24th of September 2020. We shall return, and we shall return with the next kind of tier of references to the corruption and criminality and the mass evictions that was unleashed by the Royal London Hospital criminals, and how the auction process was not taken advantage fully of by one of the highest profiled so-called social housing names in this country for the last 30 plus years. And that criminal is called David Orr, O-R-R. Now the criminal David Orr has been involved in the one way or the other with the housing organizations. And he is the main name, has been for a long time, associated with the National Federation of Housing Associations or something. This criminal is a racist criminal liar. And in September, October, November 1987, during the attempts to stop the Royal London Hospital, taking away the rights of the victims of their mass eviction by putting the properties on auction. David Orr deliberately made a decision to collude with the de facto agenda of the Royal London Hospital. And in doing so, David Orr contributed significantly to the losses and the damages and the denials and the theft and the robberies to be perpetrated against our organizations. And those losses, damages, robberies are costing every single second. And the total worth of the losses exceed the combined wealth of or combined reported wealth at present, today's date, 24th of September 2020. And as related to Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Mark Zuckerberg. And that is before taking into account the other big conglomerates, including Apple, who don't have a comparable name to the other four, but which has got more wealth than the others. But here we are saying that the losses and the damages amount to the combined value and the worth, so-called, in money terms, of all those together. Because the work we have been doing has been affecting the lives and livelihoods of billions of people in poverty and low income and in desperation across Africa and Asia and in the rest of the world. And that is the central work that we have been doing exclusively, originally, for decades. And that work has been severely impacted on by these criminals. And there are other criminals involved, including the Neom Council, including the Spitalfields Housing Small Business Association and Spitalfields Housing until the period concerned, and the others, including the Queen's Bench Division in the High Court in London, and of course the Borough of Tower Hamlets. And we shall be continuing this one up to the next one, which is part 3 of today's diagnosis of the media, meaning Thursday, the 24th of September 2020.